everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video where today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts, my review of the brand new animated version of Doctor Who's The Faceless Ones. So first off, before I get into that review, I just wanted to give you guys a general update on what's going on. Obviously, there's kind of a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. It's meant for me, my university course has pretty much come to a halt for this year, and so you'll see behind me I'm back in my room at home rather than at university, and that's going to be the plan for the foreseeable future most likely. I have just been very busy this week, hence why I haven't been able to produce any videos up until now, but I'm hoping to have also the Megan Reacts coming up tomorrow. I'm hoping that the virus thing, it shouldn't really have any impact on my videos going forwards because frankly I'm just going to be stuck at home not doing very much really, so hopefully I can keep videos coming for you guys. But really the only thing to say is stay safe. So yes, anyway, let's get on to talking about Doctor Who and the brand new animation of the Faceless Ones. So this of course was an animation that was announced around June, July time last year, so it's been quite a long time in waiting really for this to actually get released and for us to enjoy. And it's a story that of course aired back in 1967. I think it was March 1967 when this story first came out, or maybe April 1967, a very, very long time ago, 53 years ago, and it's the first time we can properly enjoy this story as close to in full as we're probably going to get, unless they magically recover a load of episodes, of course. So yes, of course, in case you don't know, or you haven't got the copy yet, this story features two existing episodes. Episodes 1 and 3 of this 6-part story do still exist in the archives and are included on this release of this animation. It's worth noting for people who are a little bit more knowledgeable around it that the versions of the episodes they've used of episode 1 and 3 are the restorations produced for the 2004 DVD the Lost in Time box set, which featured various sort of orphaned individual episodes from generally missing stories. And so it means that the kind of restoration on those particular episodes don't look as good as some of the more recent black and white releases of stories that do exist. Stories that have been released in maybe the last 10 years or so. It is noticeable that it's not brilliant because they just simply haven't presumably had the money to be able to redo the restoration of the episode for this release, which is not it's not a big thing, and it doesn't ruin the episodes particularly, but it's just something worth noting if you haven't bought it yet and you're thinking about it. Then, of course, the animation itself, they produced 6 episodes of colour animation and also a black and white version of that as well. The colour version is in 16:9 widescreen, and the black and white version is in 4:3 to match the original episodes, essentially. And disc 1, the version I watched, is the kind of, presumably the sort of main presentation version is, either watching all 6 episodes in black and white with the 4:3 version, or watching episode 1 as existing and 3 as existing and the other animated episodes slotting in between that. And that's the exact version that I watched for this. So I haven't actually watched the animated episodes 1 and 3 because I thought, in reality, for most people and for me going forward, I'm always going to choose to watch the existing episodes where they are and use the animations to kind of plug the gaps, I think. And as I say, it just felt it flowed better to watch the black and white ones and the 4:3 ones that fitted better than the colour animations. So I can't give too many comments on the colour ones, but some of the clips I've seen from the documentaries, it does look very, very impressive, very vibrant, very sort of visually interesting, I think, in terms of the colouring of these episodes. So in terms of the animation itself as well, I don't feel like it's maybe quite as strong as the Macra Terror. I think probably one of the key differences is that with the Macra Terror, it kind of feels like they just went a little bit more out there and away from the original source material, and it kind of is a lot more of a stylistic approach to what the Macra Terror could have looked like, rather than kind of sticking a little bit more closely to what the original episodes would have looked like if they still existed. Whereas I feel with the Faceless Ones, to an extent, certainly not completely, but to an extent, they've tried to stick a little bit more to what the original tended to look like, and so there's just points where it doesn't feel like it's quite as maybe action orientated. I mean, to an extent, that is just what this story is, a little less actiony focused. There's not really any old big aliens they can use, lots like the Macra from the Macra Terror. You've only really got the chameleons, which are only very briefly appearing as themselves, and are still completely humanoid shape, just with kind of a disintegrated face that then obviously morphs into other people. So there wasn't quite as much I think to work with in this animation, but certainly I feel like it is a very strong animation overall. In general, it very much kept my interest. It sort of flowed very well. Certainly you compare it to, say, The Power of the Daleks, the kind of first animation done in this new breed of animations of Doctor Who back in 2016. It really is a huge step up just in the sort of animation of all each individual characters and the backgrounds as well. It's all just much more flowing and tidier and neater and more engaging as an animation, I think it's fair to say, compared to that very first one that we got. Probably the only other avenue where it struggles a little bit is in the kind of subtle facial expressions, the sort of things that Patrick Troughton does, which they've tried really, really hard, and there are lots of different kind of models of his face and his facial expressions to try and include that. but still never going to be quite as realistic as what you would see if you were watching the real episodes. And I think just the same with the few kind of action and fight scenes that we see, particularly in episode 6. I noted with the scene with Sam Briggs where she's trying to find the chameleons in the car, and then the guy walks up behind her and they start having a bit of a sort of pulling each other and shoving and fighting a little bit. It just doesn't quite work. It's a bit too sort of slow motiony almost, I think it's fair to say, to really kind of be an intense action scene in that moment. So there were just these little things that kind of I noticed, but they were hardly major flaws. And as a whole production, it's really, really excellently done. As I say, the backgrounds look fantastic across the board. Seeing all these shots of Gatwick Airport, the planes and the space station looks phenomenal. That really is some of the highlights animation-wise. And across the board, the characters are really well animated as well. I may as well talk a little bit about this story. This is a story I think I reviewed around a year ago, actually, when I watched it as part of my Doctor Who marathon, when I watched the 2 existing episodes and the reconstructions. And I don't necessarily feel like I remember at the time thinking it was a really, really good story. I think kind of knowing the sort of somewhat of a twist that comes in this story in episode 3, where we find out there's this mysterious space station up in the sky where all these young people are getting taken from the planes. Kind of once you know that, it maybe takes a little bit away from the story, but I do still feel like it's quite a clever and interesting story. It's really, really great having it set in Gatwick Airport. It just gives it a little bit more scale to it. I love the idea of the chameleons, these shape-shifting creatures that can kind of inhabit or clone other people is probably the best way to put it. Using their own bodies can become these other people, the essence of other people, and pretend to be them, to try and infiltrate places to kind of then take over and take control. It's quite an interesting plot line that I feel like is quite well explored. There's a little bit of the old Doctor getting in a tiz with some people because he's not following procedure. They turn up out of nowhere, and you kind of struggle through an episode or 2 of him trying to sort that out before he can really get anywhere with the plot, which can get a bit frustrating, but that is just the nature of some of classic Who, I think. And it's also notable, this story, because it's the final story for Ben and Polly in Doctor Who, though given the contractual situation, it meant that they only actually really appear in episode 1 and 2 and then their final scene right at the end of episode 6. They basically just weren't contracted for anything in episodes 3, 4, 5 and 6, and so it was only down to the location filming of their exit that was done in the block that was sort of done before all the studio filming, meant they were actually included in the final episode of this story. So it's sort of noticeable once you get past episodes 1 and 2 that there is a basically complete absence of Ben and Polly, and it to an extent gives you much more of an insight into what sort of Doctor Who in the coming episodes and era would be, where it was the Doctor and Jamie, and of course we added Victoria and then Zoe into that later on. But through this story, then the Doctor and Jamie are very much the focus, along with Samantha Briggs, of course, who is the kind of was almost going to be the companion, but then she decided against it, played by Pauline Collins, who you may also remember who played Queen Victoria in Tooth and Claw. So she had both a classic and a new Who appearance, which is always a fun little moment there, and little thing to note. One of the other things I just wanted to quickly talk about, because I know a couple of people I saw had asked me to kind of give my comments on it, was the special features included on this DVD or Blu-ray or Steelbook release, however you purchase it. I've got the Steelbook, I will show you here, which looks rather lovely. I think it looks quite nice. It's a very well-designed one, looking very good. So managed to get that, not from Amazon because they failed, but there we go. Managed to get it in the end. And yeah, the special features, it's not ram-packed with special features, simply again because they don't have the budget for it, and very much all the budget is naturally going to be pumped into making the animation look as amazing as possible and not focused on stuff around it. So there's a couple of few seconds of film trims that still existed from episodes 2 and 4 in a sort of 1.5 minute little feature there that's included in the bonus features. There's also 5 minutes of footage or so of some stock footage. There's a lot of stock footage used of planes in this story just because it was a lot cheaper to be able to get some stock footage. So there's actually some quite interesting colour stock footage of this that they've pulled out of some sort of archive library from goodness knows where, because somehow they still exist 53 years later. Don't ask me how, but they do. There's a little trailer for Fury from the Deep. I think it was just the one that was posted on their YouTube channel. And the one kind of main feature in terms of the special features is the a making of documentary called Face to Face, which, although is a making of documentary, is a making of the animation, not of the original story itself. So there isn't really any sort of documentation of the original production of this story. It is very much, this documentary is only about the animation itself, which is quite interesting. It's quite interesting to learn about that process. It does it in a fairly understandable way for somebody like me who's not really particularly knowledgeable or interested in the kind of details behind animation. I still found it reasonably interesting and engaging, talking to lots of the different animators involved in different steps of the process. But yeah, it is a very much completely focused on the animation, and there isn't really any there's no interviews with any of the cast or any information particularly around the original production of the story. So that's just something worth noting if you are still looking as to whether to buy it or not. But yes, overall, I think this is a very strong release. It's a really well realised animation that really just adds something to the story. So it makes it just so much more of a complete story to be able to enjoy. enjoy because you've actually got all the animated episodes to fill in what were the reconstructions. This release provides you with so many different options and different ways to watch this story, because you've got 6 episodes of full colour animation, you've got 6 episodes of black and white animation, you've got the 2 existing episodes on disc 3. There's also the reconstructions of episodes using the telesnaps. There's a nice new version of that put together as well. I haven't personally watched all of it through, but I've had a quick look at it and it looks really quite well done, so you can watch those alongside the original episodes. If you're not a fan of animations and would prefer to just watch the telesnap reconstructions, you've got all your options open there, so it's very much a release worth getting, I'd say. But yes, that's just about it from this video, guys. Do let me know what you think, if you've got it already, of the Faceless Ones animated version or the original story as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this release or story. But apart from that, guys, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I will, fingers crossed, be back tomorrow night for a brand new Megan Reacts as well, so do not miss that. But as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.